the health protocols that we made us afraid of eating meat, the sort of cholesterol hypothesis, the saturated fat, all of those things were kind of being walked back after years and years of experimentation. While you saw obesity rates rise, you had all of these health experts saying, well, we tell people not to, we're telling people how to eat, but they're just not following the rules. Well, they were actually following the rules. And so what ended up happening was, and the worst part is the consumer at the end of it blames themselves, right? They can't control themselves in a toxic food environment. And it's a marketer's dream, right? You sell them something, you sell them the idea that they're, the low fat trend, like Snackwells and these low fat foods that were just so loaded with refined sugars and refined grains, and you can't control yourself, so it's your fault, right? And so of the 7 deadly sins that we still talk about, gluttony seems to be like the one that we can still celebrate in sort of ways. And you walk through any transportation hub nowadays, whether it's an airport or bus station or train station, and you see people who have to move, who are typically sort of marginalized in this in our world nowadays because they're moving from desk to desk, who actually have to move, and you just see the scale of the obesity epidemic, right? And it's really terrifying to watch because you're raising kids in an environment like this, and you're also trying to fortify yourself in this environment, right? You're the crazy person who's eating meat or, is a meat dominant diet. People look at you and they're like, what are you doing, right? So what you end up dealing with at the end result of that is an entirely I want to kind of go back to your pharmaceutical analogy. So I'm reading a book right now called Cracked. It's James Davies' book. He's an English psychotherapist, and he went and he interviewed all of the people surrounded around what is this sort of compendium, the encyclopedia of what we would consider to be mental disorders, psychological mental disorders. And so I don't know if you remember growing up seeing advertisements for depression medications. If you felt sad or depressed, have trouble sleeping for more than 3 weeks, you may have a chemical imbalance, right? Here, take this pill for the rest of your life. Yes, it has horrible side effects, and yes, it's going to, maybe cause impotency or, decrease sexual drive or anything like that, but this will make you happy. Well, this guy, he interviews this guy who did a meta-analysis of all of the trial data that he could find on the efficacy of a lot of these drugs, antipsychotic medication and antidepressants. And so when he looked at the meta-analysis, he said that really, for the most part, these medications do not much better than a sugar pill, right? And so he put out this meta-analysis, and people lost their minds. This is 2012. The pharmaceutical agencies, everybody, even the FDA were like, whoa. Well, you didn't look at all of the data. And he was like, what do you mean I didn't look at all the data? He was like, but you didn't show all the trials that we didn't publish. He was like, you didn't publish trials? He was like, show me those. And so Freedom of Information Act, he ended up getting a lot of, so pharmaceutical agencies will go, they do antidepressant trials. If 9 out of those 10 trials don't show that this thing works better than placebo, but one does, well, which one do they publish, right? They publish the one. And even if it's a mild efficacy, it shows some degree of efficacy, right? And so you go and you deal with that. So he starts to look at the 9 as well, and he's like, wait a second, it doesn't even show that this is even moderately better than a sugar pill. That any of the benefits you have from this are, one, from thinking that you're taking a pill, right? So the placebo effect. So you think you're taking a pill every single day, you pop up, you wake up every morning, you take this pill, you think it's working, and so your mind creates an environment where you now believe that it's working. Then you have the secondary part of it, which is you experience side effects. So then your body is like, your mind is like, well, I'm experiencing side effects, so there has to be good effects as well, right? And so you push that as well, And so one of the problems with the DSM for years was they were like, it's called the depression clause, right? So the DSM says if you've been depressed for more than 3 weeks, then maybe you have a chemical imbalance. But what if your mother passes away? What if she dies? Now you're mourning, right? So how long should mourning last? And so they always had this depression clause. If you have an event in your life that causes you to be depressed, so a traumatic event, right? Somebody in your life passes away or something like that, what is the maximum period of time before we decide you have a chemical imbalance, right? Never mind that most people are doing jobs they don't want to fucking do, right? So they're not doing jobs that they want to do. So if you have a lifestyle that's depressing, that's okay. You have a chemical imbalance. If your mother passes away, all right, well, you have some trauma. And so they couldn't square this circle for a long time because they had this depression clause that was centered around mourning. Well, so the newest DSM, how did they reconcile this? They got rid of the depression clause. They were like, listen, if you're depressed at all, if you're having trouble sleeping at all, we're just going to say you have a chemical imbalance because everybody should be fucking happy nowadays, right? And so, like, you just look at that world, you know, and so you have the food environment, right, which is always getting you to look up like the new novel food. 40,000 new products are entering our shelves that are competing for your attention, all of which didn't exist 100 years ago. Then you have all of the chemical factors that go into creating, you know, any number of different, you know, metabolic dysfunctions that happen in your body. You have a sugar-laden, ultra-processed food environment. Now you feel terrible all the time. You have problems waking. You have problems sleeping at night. Well, we've got this thing. It's a sugar pill. In essence, it's a sugar pill, but you can take this just to keep going, you know. But unfortunately, it's slightly addictive, and you have to take it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just like, what are we doing?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
It's a big question, and man, it's so deep and disturbing considering how many Americans are on these pharmaceutical interventions. Meanwhile, what are we doing about the root cause? Absolutely nothing. And if we think about, well, what are some less invasive quick fixes? Exercise is a big one that you could go for a walk every morning. I'm pretty sure omega-3, like a cod liver oil supplement, has outperformed any depressants. Even something like creatine, I've read, shows some high potential, and that's just like a scoop in water. And there are benefits beyond cognitive enhancement with the creatine supplement. And if we think about the root cause of like, hey, what is causing all this depression that we're experiencing? Yeah, I think a lot of Americans do have meaningless jobs, and that's definitely a contributor, but the food as well. You mentioned all these new food products. Imagine if a new food product had to advertise the way pharmaceuticals had to advertise. You'd have, you know, hey, here's this new snack. It's this cheesy cracker shaped like a fish. It'll give you some calories, but hey, by the way, it may contribute to obesity and depression. But hey, it's the snack that smiles back, Goldfish. You know, give it to your children.
Right. Yeah. And they taunt you with it, right? So you see, like, Lay's will be like, I bet you can't eat just one, right? Right? And so they know they've created an ultra addictive substance. You know, they were using the same science that the cigarette industry was using. You know, they knew how to create addiction. And, you know, one of the bigger problems with the way these companies operate is we don't produce enough children for them to be able to make quarterly and yearly profits. And so Wall Street will punish them if they're not doing that. And so what they're constantly trying to do is get the same consumer to overconsume.